Big welcome back to Dr. Jeff Engel, director of the Center for Presidential History at SMU. So we look back 8 years ago, Barack Obama promising to unite the country. He hardly united the country. He was a pretty divisive president.
Well, it's a really interesting case study in how numbers and perception can really tell us two different stories. If we look at where Obama took office and where we are now, we've seen almost unprecedented growth. We've seen the unemployment rate go down. We've seen America's involvement in foreign wars go down. And by every economic and statistical measure, the country is in a better place.
But however, we started way down here because we're in a recession.
Right, and of course the man who is taking over for him ran on the campaign that America is in a terrible place. So clearly the hope and inspiration that Obama came into office promising did not develop. Now it's a very interesting question, and I think there's blame on both sides here over whether or not that is the fault of his opponents, especially in Congress, or whether or not it's the White House's fault, whether or not it's Obama's fault. Clearly there was a mismatch between the rhetoric of the president and much of the country. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that we had a different kind of president, not just an African-American president, but also a president who frankly fit the mold at a moment when people wanted change. When we think about Obama's resume, here we have a senator, a man who went to Harvard, a man who went to Columbia. That shouldn't surprise us as we come to a presidency.
Right.
And yet people wanted radical change. And he actually was a relatively middle-of-the-road person on policy, which meant that you had people unhappy with him for not doing enough, and people unhappy with him for doing too much.
But a little antagonistic toward the Republican-controlled Congress, which he had for part of his term anyway, not all of it, but where he made the point that, hey, I won, therefore you must do what I want you to do. And the Republicans in Congress and some of his fellow Democrats said, no, we don't. Well, we were elected to represent our people, not you.
Right, and this is one of those moments where we are going to see hypocrisy played out daily on Capitol Hill, where we're going to see over the next 2 years in particular, Republicans say, we have control, we can do what we want, and Democrats protest that the Republicans are not being democratic enough, if you will. Exactly the same thing happened 8 years ago when Democrats held both the Capitol Hill and the White House.
Looking back at history, though, is it good that at least the country will be headed in one direction with a president and a Congress of the same party? At least, for better, for worse, good, bad, what, at least we're heading in one direction and not just in gridlock like we have been.
Right. The number one thing that people complain about Congress is that it doesn't get things done. They're going to get things done. And it's a very interesting question, it seems to me, how much we're going to see Donald Trump's agenda or how much we're going to see Congress's agenda, whether this is going to become essentially Paul Ryan's America. And one of the reasons that we have to remember that historically, and again, we have a lot of data on this at this point, he's the 45th president, historically, Donald Trump is the least popular person to become elected president in the 20th century. Not just in terms of his own election, but in terms of after the election. Usually somebody wins the election and the country rallies around. Think about George W. Bush, who took over in 2000 in a disputed election, but by the time he took office, about 60%, 65% of Americans said, yeah, we think you're doing a good job, we're comfortable with you. Trump's approval rating has actually dropped since the election. So we have a very weak president and a very strong Congress. It might be a time where we see a shift of power back up Pennsylvania Avenue.
Right. From the president back to the halls of Congress. We'll see. We'll stay with, see you later, and stay with Fox 4 for extended coverage of today, Inauguration Day.